Appreciate your helpfulness. I'd like you to turn with me to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And as those of you who have been here a while are well familiar, Mark chapter 5 follows Mark chapter 4. That's exactly right. And that's important because of what happened right in front of what we're going to talk about today. If you remember, and I think it was last week, we were talking about the fact that Jesus said that you're going to do my works and greater works than these you're going to do. And we talked about the fact that that the miracles of healing the blind and these and even raising the dead were tremendous things, but a greater miracle is the salvation of the soul. And that's happening ever since down through the ages, and we're able to be a part of that. And so Christ was just beginning that process. And it's astounding that he would say that. Greater works than these shall you do. And we're going to get an example of a greater work than calming the sea as we look at Jesus calming the soul of a man. And so I want you to just remind you of what happened right at the end of chapter 4. I'm going to start reading at verse 35, and then we're going to read to the end of the chapter. We'll pray, and then we'll get into chapter 5. And these events are right on top of each other. It says, and I'm in Mark 4:35. And the same day, when the even was come, he saith unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him, even as he was, in the ship. There were also with him other little ships. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said unto them, Why are ye so fearful? How is it that ye have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? And let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word. We thank you for the privilege of looking into it. Oh, Lord, give us understanding of it. This is just the precursor as to what we're talking about today. A far greater miracle, you being able to change the life, the eternal destiny of a man. We pray that you'll give us understanding of what your word has to say and apply it to each heart as only you can do. In Jesus' name, amen. So we just read the context of what we're going to talk about today, and we see Jesus in that context stilling a huge storm. He had given a command to cross to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. He was worn out himself, and so he falls asleep as the ship is just beginning to go out into the Sea of Galilee. And the disciples run into a storm that have these fishermen afraid, thinking they're going down. And of course they yell to the Lord, ask for his help, and he did, calming the sea simply with a command. So we see that context, the context of Jesus stilling a huge storm. But I want you to look now in chapter 5 at a man who's in a storm, and a major storm. One that you and I honestly would be afraid to encounter, as many people in his day were. Mark chapter 5, let's start with verse 1. And they came over unto the other side of the sea, unto the country of the Gadarenes. Now, they're going west to east across the Sea of Galilee, and they're going into a region that is not Jewish. It's a Gentile region. This man that they're going to encounter, we would call him today maybe insane, something along that line. But his insanity is not based upon any kind of a mental dysfunction. It's based upon a spiritual issue. And there are times when that's correct. Not always by any stretch, but there are times when that is what's going on. And so let's notice the sad characteristics that this man is dealing with. Verse 2. And when he was come out of the ship, this is Jesus coming out of the ship, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. And now, what does it mean to have an unclean spirit? Does that mean you don't clean your room very well? Is that what we're talking about? He's demon-possessed. That's right. He's got a demon. He's controlled by Satan. And it's not a good situation for this guy. He's showing all kinds of signs that this control that Satan is bringing upon him is wreaking havoc in his life. Let's keep reading. Verse 3, who had his dwelling among the tombs. Now, can you imagine that? Living among the tombs? So we see that he's living in a morbid atmosphere. Imagine a couple about to get married, and the bride asks her bridegroom-to-be, her love. She says, so where do you think we'll live? To which the young fellow replies, I've been seriously thinking about buying several burial plots in the local graveyard and building a house on those plots. Now, you can imagine she'd be a little concerned at this point, but he says, I've got some good reasons. First of all, it's a very cheap form of real estate. We only are going to have to buy what we want, what we're going to use. Think about the perpetual care contract. We won't have to mow the lawn. We have access to flowers, quiet neighbors, etc. Do you think that the girl's going to want to live there? I don't think so. I don't think any of us would want to live there. The graveyard is in many ways a depressing atmosphere. And this guy is living there. And in one of the other Gospels, this is in 3 Gospels, it's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And it talks about the fact that he was not able to live in a house. That he is, why do you think he's hanging among the graves? Why do you think he's there? I'm sorry? Well, in some ways, actually, it's kind of interesting. Matthew's account is that people were afraid to go near that area because they were how he puts it, exceedingly fierce. Can you imagine? He would come out and get you. What's that? Nobody would want to be near him. And you think of the preoccupation with death? There's a lot of that, by the way. That people, especially when Satan begins to control their lives, this preoccupation with death. Keep reading, verse 3. So he had his dwelling among the tombs. No man could bind him, no, not with chains. It's interesting that all efforts to help or to control him had failed. And as a matter of fact, notice verse 4. Because that he had often been bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. So he's exhibiting some extra human strength, some superhuman strength from the demonic forces within him. So he's like, again, a hopeless case. As you're looking at this guy, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to be around him at all. I'd be very much afraid of a guy like this. But he's got more characteristics. Keep going. Verse 5. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. So now we're seeing a couple other things. We're seeing these torturous thoughts that are going through his mind, and he's crying all the time, just so distraught by them. And then what about the idea of cutting himself? That's actually becoming, in many circles, a tragic reality with many of our young people, self-mutilation. And so he's actually, and I remember dealing with a teenager a number of years ago now, who was doing cuttings on her arm repeatedly. And I would ask her, why do you do that? And she would say something along the line of, in her state, she would get to the place where she thought she was in some way letting out the grief or the anger. And so this guy's involved in self-mutilation. Now, there's also, in the account in Luke, some other characteristics about him. So let me put the verse up and see what else we learn about this guy. It says, and when he stepped out on the land, again, this is Luke's account of the same thing, a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs. So we get a couple other pieces of information about this guy. He came from the city, which is kind of interesting, a city nearby. But there's something else. What did they say about his demonic possession? It's been going a long time. That's exactly right. So we're learning he spent a long time under this bondage. And there's one other detail we learned from Luke's account that we didn't see in Matthew. He's not wearing any clothes. So he's definitely showing some behavior, antisocial behavior here that's associated with his demonic possession. Now, verse 29 gives us some more details about him. It says, for it, talking about the demon, had often seized him, and he was kept under guard, bound with chains and shackles, and he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Now, there's two other things that I picked out of that verse that we didn't have in Mark's account. Do you see up in the top there? What do you notice there? That's right. The demon wasn't always as active in his mind and heart. So it would seize him at certain times. He would experience seasons of demonic activity that was greater than others. Can I tell you, this is one of the most, with people who battle with drug addiction and alcohol addiction, that type of thing, even things like pornography, etc. It's sometimes even more torturous when they feel like they're getting away from it. And we're starting to kind of get clean, and all of a sudden it comes back on them again. And that's what seems to be going on in this demonic torture of this man's soul. That he kind of let him go for a little bit and then come back in and seize him again and take him to new lows. By the way, there's one other thing in that verse. It's down toward the bottom of it. What did you notice that's not said in Mark there? Yeah, something about the wilderness. He's driven of the devil into the wilderness. The idea of isolation, driven to isolation. Do people feel that today? Absolutely. Even Christian people start to drift from God, and it's like, I don't want to be, you feel like everybody's just judging you when you walk through the door, and many times that's not true, but it feels that way. And Satan is trying to why drive him into the wilderness? Why out there? I'm sorry? Yes, he can control him. He can get him away from any kind of positive influence and just beat on him mentally and spiritually. 10 characteristics of the guy. He is certainly in a tortured state, no doubt about that. Now, let me ask you this. If we pop those same things up, and I have 9 of them because the number 1 was being controlled itself, how many of those might fit you? And I know we like to say, no, it's not me, can't happen to me. But when we drift from God, morbid thoughts, hopelessness, that's what he's feeling. The torturous thoughts, even self-mutilation is a problem. Think of the long-term battles and the isolation that many, even times believing people may feel. I'm just saying that Satan can work great darkness in the heart of certainly unbelievers as well as believers. So now, what does the Lord do to help him? Or how does this go about? Well, actually, the guy makes some decisions that when you look back on it, they're not that bad when Christ showed up. So let's skip down to verse 6. And notice, we're back in Mark chapter 5. And notice with me starting with verse 6. It says, and when he saw Jesus afar off, he ran and worshipped him. So we got 2 decisions that he made there. What was the first one? Yeah, he ran to Jesus, not away from him. That's a good move. In our isolation, Satan doesn't want us to run to Christ. And I don't think the demons were really wanting him to go there. But he did. And he runs to Jesus. What was the second good decision he made? He worshiped him. Now, again, it may not be full worship like you think of a believer at this point. He's not a believer, but at least he's being respectful. He's bowing in front of the Lord. And now that the demons are there, whether they wanted to be or not, he's going to do something else, and actually they're going to do the same thing. Let's keep reading. Right now we're at verse 7. It It says, and cried with a loud voice, and said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High God? How did he know that? He hasn't even met the Lord yet. He knows his name. He knows who he is. The demons knew. That's right. And whether he dragged them there or they were trying to intimidate the Lord, which I don't think they were. I think personally they got dragged there with the man because he still got some control of his body. And now, all of a sudden, he's in front of the Lord, and they're in front of the Lord. But it's interesting, his thought process. What do I have to do with you? It's like, I don't have any, there's nothing in common with you and I, Lord. And then he asks him this question, I adjure thee by God, or I'd like you to promise by God, that thou torment me not. I would like you to promise that you won't torment me. Again, other gospel accounts give us a few more details. The demons themselves were asking for mercy. Satan may act like he's running the show, and it may seem like that, but to be honest with you, Satan is absolutely terrified of trying to go one-to-one with the Lord. And these demons understand this is not good. Satan lost big time, if you remember, when he tried tempting Christ. Notice, if you would, verse 8. For he said to him, Come out of the man, thou unclean spirit. So Jesus, when he encounters him, really, and from the other gospel accounts, it's early on. It's just he begins to deal with him on the fact of I want this spirit to come out of this man. So ultimately, when you look at verse 6 and 7 together, what is the guy doing? He runs to Christ. He's respectful of Christ. But there's one other thing he's doing. What is he asking for? What's he really asking for? What do you think, Amy? He's asking for mercy. That's right. And the demons themselves are going to ask for mercy. Kind of interesting. So I think those are three good choices. He's running to Christ. He's respectful of the Lord when he gets there. And he is asking for mercy. I adjure thee by God, don't torment me. It's interesting that, again, the demons inhabiting and tormenting Christ asked for mercy as well on a specific area. If you want to flip there, you can. It's the next book back. It's Luke. Luke's account of the same incident. It's Luke 8 and verse 31. And I'll read it to you if you're not fast enough to get there. Here's what the demons were asking Jesus. They besought him that he would not command them to go out into the deep. Now, that's how it is in the King James. That word deep literally means the abyss. They were afraid when encountering Jesus, he was going to throw them into hell directly right then. And they are begging Christ. These demons were begging for mercy. So we see some bad characteristics or sad characteristics of this man. We also see some good choices that he made when he encountered Christ. Now let's talk about what the Lord does here as he delivers this man from the storm. Well, I'd like to start by noticing and reminding you again that Jesus weathered a storm to get to him. He went across the Sea of Galilee and went through a storm to get to this guy. And those disciples felt like they were about ready to die. And Jesus is going after this guy, going across the Sea of Galilee. There was a bunch of people around him over there. If you remember, they had to dismiss this huge multitude. And he goes across the sea to get this guy. And can I tell you that God is personal? That he cares about you as an individual. And I'm thankful he cares about me too. And so Jesus weathers the storm to get to him, but then you'll find that he's going to deal with the guy's true needs, what he really needs. He doesn't just need some clothes, and he doesn't need a nice house that he can go to. He's got deep spiritual needs that the Lord can meet, and only the Lord can meet. So the question is, what do you really need? Well, you need a deliverance from Satan's power, just like this guy did. And so let's notice what happens. Verse 8 again, he told the spirit to come out of him. He commanded that to be so. Verse 9, he asked him, what is thy name? Now, he's not asking the guy his name. It's not like Mark or Philip or anything like that. And you'll notice who answers him. He answered it saying, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now, some of you may have a note on that. So who's talking when it says, my name is Legion? Those are the demons. And he says, there's many of us. Now, Roman legion, I don't know if you have a note on that. Somewhere, several thousand men, maybe 6,000 men. It's not saying that he's got that many demons within him, but he's got a number of demons in him. And so that's their group name is Legion. Now again, verse 10, and he besought him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now, it's interesting. Is the man saying, don't send these demons away, or is it the demons themselves saying, don't send us away? And I think it's the latter of the two. That the demons are saying, don't send us away. And again, they may be talking, when it says out of the country, they may be talking about the same thing that Luke is mentioning, not being afraid of being cast directly into hell. Now, let's keep reading. It says, now there was nigh unto the mountain a great herd of swine feeding, and all the devils besought him, saying, send us into the swine that we may enter into them. So they're saying, okay, if we've got to leave, don't just have us, don't cast us into hell. Just let us leave. We'll go into the pigs. And forthwith, verse 13, Jesus gave them leave. Notice he was merciful to these evil spirits. He said, get out of here, you can go there. And the unclean spirits went out, entered into the swine. The herd ran violently down a steep place into the sea. They were about 2,000 and were choked into the sea. And I'm sorry, but it's true. That's first case of mass suicide. But anyway, when you've been here 25 years, the problem is there's so many of them heard that joke already. Verse 14. And they that fed the swine fled. Can I tell you this? Again, these guys are a distance away, I think because they know this guy is a very fierce and dangerous man. But they evidently saw what was going on. They saw a boat coming to shore, and in all probability, I'm just telling you, when you read, and we read down through, I think you're going to see this, these guys were watching. What's going to happen when that boat gets to shore, and we'll just call him Matt the Maniac, he comes out of the tombs, something's going to happen here. And so they're watching, and I don't know if Jesus pointed or what, but all of a sudden, all their pigs are going down and drowning in the sea. And you'll notice, verse 14, and they that fed the swine fled and told it in the city and in the country. And they went out to see what it was that was done. These guys knew there was a connection between what Jesus was doing on shore there and what happened to their pigs. And some of the other Gospels even mention it a little bit more specifically, that they talked about the man and the swine. They talked about both. So it seems they were watching what was going on. Let's keep reading, verse 15. And they come to Jesus. These are the people that had heard in the city what had happened with all these pigs drowning, and the guy that was such a demon-possessed maniac, really. They come to Jesus and see him that was possessed with the devil and had the legion, sitting and clothed and in his right mind. And they were free. Now let's stop there for just a second. And I want you to think about, after Jesus destroyed the demonic stronghold in this man's heart and mind, what evidences was there that this was real? When those people come out, and they know what this guy was like, he's not far out of town. When they come out and they see this guy who's been running around naked and literally assaulting people who come near him, living in the tombs, what are they noticing? Okay, somebody said he's clothed, okay? He's got clothes on. He's at peace. He's sitting. He's not deranged, can't sit down. He's sitting. He's got clothes on. And the last one, he's got sanity again. He's in his right mind. When you put the gospel accounts together, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Let me read you out of Matthew. He says, then those who kept them, these are the guys that kept the pigs, fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed man. Actually, men. I'll get there in a second. Now, what was the townspeople's reaction when they heard about all the pigs dying, they heard about this man who was so crazy, Jesus dealing with him, and what's their reaction at the end of verse 15 when they saw this? They're afraid. Why? Why would that make you afraid? If you were here in Sunday school, this was the question that I had as I'm studying this, and I'm asking myself, why are they afraid? And I don't know that I have a real good answer. I've got a couple things I wrote down. Why be afraid? This guy's just been healed. I'm sorry? They're seeing Jesus' power, but what does that contrast with? Because did they try to help this guy? They did. So what are they also seeing? Yeah, their frailty, the fact that they were unable to do what Jesus could do. It is showing their false religion. Isn't that interesting? They saw the power of Christ. You guys hit that one. The impotence of their own false religion. What also might have made them afraid, and I do not know, but I'll just give you a thought on this, see what you think of it. Was it that's a lot of value going down into the sea? 2,000 pigs. I don't know about you, but that's a lot of pork. If you owned those pigs, you just lost a lot of money. Were they afraid because of what it might cost them if Christ helped other people? I don't know. But the Lord is certainly showing a priority that people are more important than pigs. This man's soul was more important than their herd and their possessions. They're afraid. Verse 16. They that saw it told them how it befell him that was possessed with the devil. See, they did see what went on. And also concerning the swine. We saw it. And there's no doubt this is evidence that this guy, he's been delivered from Satan's power. But there's a second thing that Christ is going to give this guy as a result of coming to the shore. And that is, he now has a relationship with Christ and he wants it. Verse 17. And they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. Isn't that interesting? These people from the town, and again, they probably did not know the Lord. They're asking Jesus to leave. They want him to go. And the only thing I can think of, and you may have a better idea, seriously, you're more than welcome to share, especially after what you're thinking, but I can't figure out why they would want Jesus to leave except for the fact that they were worried that they might lose more stuff. I don't know if you have a better idea. But they want him to go. But notice verse 18. And when he was come into the ship, so Jesus is honoring their wishes. He that had been possessed with the devil prayed him that he might be with him. You see, he's got a relationship with the Lord now. He's been delivered. And he wants to be with the Lord. Lord, let me stay with you. Let me go with you. Howbeit Jesus suffered him not, but saith unto him, Go home to thy friends, and tell them how great things the Lord hath done for thee, and hath had compassion on thee. So Jesus said, no, I've got a different job for you to do. The man wants to remain close to Christ. The lost people didn't. They wanted to get rid of him. This man wants to be close to Christ. And so Jesus says, he says, no, I've got something better for you to do. Instead of going with me, he said, I want you to go back and tell everybody around. What's interesting is this is a region that Jesus is not going to have a lot of time to spend in this region. And so he's going to basically focus on the nation of Israel. This is not the nation of Israel. And he's saying, look, I want you to go back and I want you to tell everybody that you can about what God has done for you. And let's see if he did it. Verse 20. And he departed and began to publish in Decapolis. That's the name for 10 cities in that region. So he didn't just go to his own city. He went throughout that region. He went to Decapolis. He told them how great things Jesus had done for him. And all men did marvel. And the Lord got the message out through this guy to who knows how many people that are going to be in heaven that we're going to meet one day because of this guy's conversion. This is greater, folks, than stilling the sea. It's greater than opening the eyes of a blind man. This is dealing with a human being and his choices and his soul, and Jesus transforming him. Now, I will tell you, as Paul Harvey used to say, there is the rest of the story. By the way, I want to take you to a passage first. Before you go to Matthew chapter 8, I want you to go to Matthew, and you can leave Mark behind, I'll not be back. But I want you to go to Mark chapter 12. Because when I was talking a moment ago, I mentioned that Jesus met his most basic needs, his biggest needs. And the first one was to be delivered from satanic control. And the second one is to have a relationship with the Lord. And so I ask you this question. What if Jesus merely delivered him from Satan's power at that moment, but the man didn't really establish a relationship with Christ? Would that have been good enough? No. That there are two sides of that coin. One is the deliverance from Satan's power, and the second one is a desire to walk with the Lord. And Jesus really refers to this here in Matthew chapter 12. I want you to notice, if you would, verse 43 down to verse 45. He's talking to his generation that was in the process of, specifically the religious leadership who were in the process of rejecting him. And he says this, when an unclean spirit is gone out of a man, he walketh through dry places seeking rest and findeth none. Now, when it's talking about the person walking through dry places, I don't think he's talking about the man. He's talking about the evil spirit. I'll tell you why I say that. Verse 44. Then he saith, I will return unto my house from whence I came out, and when he is come, he findeth it empty, swept, and garnished. Then goeth he and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself. So who is he talking about that has been walking through the dry places seeking rest, and he wants to go back home where he originally was? Who is he talking about? The demonic spirit. And if you'll notice, he was cast out in verse 43. Verse 44, when he looks back, he says, there's nothing in this man's life to replace me. There's no relationship with God. God had given him a deliverance, but he wasn't putting Christ back in there. So what does the demon do? He goes out, he finds 7 more wicked spirits, more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there, and the last state of that man is worse than the first. And Jesus goes on and applies that to his generation. Even so shall it be also unto this wicked generation. Quite scary. There are times when God will deliver a person from bondage, and it's obvious that it was the Lord that did it. And the reality is that instead of like this man who's in our text in Mark, and in our text in Luke as well, who comes back and says, Lord, what can I do for you? I want to serve you. I want to be with you. I want to give everything, the rest of my life to you. That's how the man responds in Mark chapter 5. But there is the danger of just stopping at deliverance and not replacing that empty spot in your heart with the Lord himself. Does everybody see that? Okay, now what's the rest of the story? Go to Matthew chapter 8 and look with me at verse 28.